Okay, welcome once again. My name is David Barron. This is our weekly hypnosis discussion group. We have some people here and coming in. I want to welcome you all. And today I tend to sort of think about the topic that we're going to cover. And frankly, I've been somewhat busy, so I've had a conversation before this with Graham, and what I want to talk about is I'll talk about several things, um, but I want to talk about the concept of the shadow. This is Carl Jung's work, and at least my understanding of it. Uh, when you ask someone what sort of boundaries they have for their life, they have a set of rules that they live by, and the set of boundaries they say they're not going to go, uh, they're going to violate. And what you'll find is in stressful situations, there's at least a desire to go beyond that. The typical example is if you feel like you're a decent person and you get upset from social media and you start to visualize violent and upsetting things happening to people you don't like, that's your shadow coming out. And the way a person deals with that is by first not pushing it away, because that's the first natural tendency. uh, the way you deal with it is by recognizing it as a part of yourself, and the very first thing, once you take that first step, okay, this is a part of me that I don't like, and I just recommend you engage in a conversation with it, a very one-sided dialogue. You just say, hello, Shadow. I know you're there. I know you mean well. And I want you to just step aside and be present. I know you're going to be there in the background all the time, but thank you for caring about me. That's the very first conversation that you have with it. And the shadow is going to come up again, according to Carl Jung, in dreams. And these are going to be violent things that you find yourself doing, or mysterious dark forces that sort of compel you to do things in dreams. Um, there's a lot of marketing about, you know, discover the great things about yourself by doing shadow work. And the best shadow work you can do is just acknowledging that there is this part of you that is doing that. Um, once you start to do that, you start to recognize that everyone has this. And you start to recognize that those people who are doing those things that you do not like are triggering the shadow, and the end result is that you're realizing that they are just doing something far beyond what you would do. So anything you say, I would think about committing violence, but I would never do it. That's your shadow speaking. And doing this work creates, first of all, a distance between all those things that trigger you. And then secondly, it creates a compassion and a sense of empathy for those people that you start to disagree with. Um, we talk about Chase Hughes a lot here in his work. He talks about how to see people, see them as problems, see them as facts, and see them as reasons. But there's another level. When you see people you do not like, you see them as mirrors. They're actually a part of you that you're pushing down. And when you're able to do that, there creates a huge amount of compassion toward them and a pause in all that sense of anger. There are a lot of books out there that'll tell you how to do shadow work, usually through journaling, and it's all very useful stuff. On a personal note, speaking of shadow work, years ago, about 10 or 15 years ago, I was in a very oppressive relationship, and it was incredibly painful. And so I kept pushing down all of my anger and aggression. And the result, what I decided to do with that is I started to write a fiction, and the fiction is currently on Amazon. It's called The Mind Programmer. It covers it's narrated by an unnamed person who's part of this high mysterious organization called the Order. That's sort of a substitute for the Illuminati. And he has all these mind control programmings and very little moral boundaries to implement this. And so when I started to write this, I started to articulate in story form how a really true sociopath would respond, growing up and engineering the death of his mean nanny, and also, how he would try and deal with someone who is completely disgusting, but who's part of this order and part of the infrastructure, and how he really has this sort of psychopathic distance that inhibits his compassion, and he recognizes it and he uses it very, very sociopathically to his advantage and as part of his part in the order. And so a couple of years ago, I was talking with an author, a fellow who has written some books, and he brought this book up to me, and I had not thought about it in maybe 10 years. And he said, and this is under my pen name of Dantalian Jones. He says, I was reading this book you wrote called The Mind Programmer. I was reading, and he was saying, I was thinking, what the F is up with this guy? He's crazy. And I had to almost apologize and say, no, this is a fiction. It was just me channeling my shadow during the darkest parts of my life. And it forced me to go back and actually read the book that I had written, the little novella. And the result was, first, I thought for me, it was really entertaining. I really liked reading it. I thought it was relatively good storytelling. And second of all, I realized, God, I don't know if I want anyone to read this because they're going to think that's me. But the next result of that was, okay, I think I need to start writing about this character, because it was a really interesting character and lots of opportunities for strange and bizarre and incredibly dark stories. I mean, we're talking about a person who witnessed a ritual murder, essentially, and how he compartmentalized it. And so what I'm doing currently, my time is focused in on creating more to this. I hope to have it out in the next couple of months, and we'll see how that goes. So that's sort of my short take on this thing we call the shadow. And doing shadow work is, first of all, I think it is really important. It's also specifically uncomfortable, and you just have to step into it, noticing that you're thinking about all those things that you would say, I would never do this, but then you realize there are moments in your life where you have the feeling, if I could do this, I might have some joy out of it. I remember talking to a friend of mine who is a gun owner, and I explained that, where I'm at, there's a lot of hunting, and he'd be welcome here. And he said, I can't shoot four-legged animals. It hurts my heart. But he was also in the military. And I said, I know exactly what you're saying, because I have a dream of there becoming a zombie apocalypse, so I could just kill things that walk on two legs. I would just love to do that. So that was my knowledge of the shadow. Alex, welcome. How are you doing?
Okay, so far. I'm sorry I was on late. Had problems with an unstable connection getting on.
That's fine. Yeah, if this is mostly free form here, I wanted to talk about some things we spoke about earlier with Graham about the shadow. And if you have something to add here, please raise your hand and let me know. I wanted to, for those people who are working and doing a hypnosis practice, or for that matter, any hypnosis, any practice at all where referrals and good reviews are important, I want to give you the formula that I use to get referrals and secondly, get really good reviews. The first step is at the end, I'll always ask, I work with people over the course of 3 sessions. I'll ask them to consider the people that would benefit from this, where they want to stop smoking, deal with anxiety, fear of flying, and things like that. And I won't ask them to give me a name. I'll say, just mention my name and let me talk to them. I do know people who want those names so they can call them. I personally have yet to do that. Having done that, I had a very good phone call with a former client who I worked with through to get over his fear of flying. And he told me that he was on a flight and he was just fine with it. He's now very comfortable with it. And there was some poor person who was a medical representative. He was in medical scrubs and he was having an incredible panic attack in the middle of the flight. And so he reached over and said, "Hey, you should try hypnosis. Let me find you this guy's email address." And we laughed because I could not have a better referral. That was a 5-star referral in that case. So just mentioning to mention my name, I always like to tell people, if you know anyone who is just slightly neurotic, mention my name. And that always gets a laugh, and they run through their list in their mind of the slightly neurotic people, which is most of us that we have in our mind. The other way I do that is at the final session, I will send them an email. I remind them in the email are audio recordings that they can listen to that are hypnosis oriented. And I also remind them that there's a link in the email to post a Google review. Now, if you are running a business, you should probably have a Google account, a business Google account where you can put up reviews. Having systematized that process for about 10 years, in the area where I practice, there are maybe 3 or 4 hypnotists. The person who has the most reviews is me. I have 285. The second person has 70. So and again, I don't do much follow-up after sending that email or maybe a second email for referrals. So that's one of the best ways to do it. And you can do that regardless of your business. It's just, mention, I just tell them, post a review. It would be an act of kindness on your part, and just be honest about your experience. And a good many of them do, at least enough of them do. So I have the most rankings of reviews in people in my area. So that's the simple process I use to get referrals. Does anyone have any questions or comments about anything we've been talking about now?
Yeah, one that I picked up in about 2015 from a chap in Florida was pretty much similar to what you said. Like, if you know anybody who's a bit neurotic, give them my name. What he always said was, once you say, for example, you finished and said, if what we've done is, if you just say something really simple on the lines like, if you like what we've done in these sessions, please feel free to tell somebody else about it. He says, then that way, you're asking for a referral, but you're not projecting yourself as being needy of saying, please tell them about me if there's stuff and I really need it, sort of thing.
No, absolutely.
It's a case of, it's done good. Please feel free to tell them, because then it takes an obligation off of them indirectly to tell them about it. Oh, you see, just feel free to do it. He goes, oh, okay, and it takes that weight off the shoulder of, oh my God, he's going to ask for referrals. He's going to ask me for 3 people, a bit like what network marketers do, saying, can you give me 3 names of people who are looking for an extra income sort of thing? And straight away, that person feels massively under pressure and wondering, How did I get seduced into this cult again?
Yeah, absolutely. I have worked in a business where that is one of the required things you have to do at the end of the presentation. Who are three people that you know? It is mildly uncomfortable. And again, I have yet to implement that. But I know people who do coaching and they do it very successfully because they get good results. So it's certainly an option. Yeah. But yeah, just you do have to mention it. And if you're like doing hypnosis just with anybody, and you do it for free and you do it to just give a benefit, ask if there's someone else that would benefit from it. And if you can arrange an introduction, I've had people do that as well. I say, just send an email to me and this other person, introduce us. I'll continue the conversation from there. So that's a perfect way of engineering that. All right. Anything else? Now we can open this up to anything. Like I said, I didn't do a huge plan on this. Anyone else? Last week we talked about the changes that I made in the operations manual, and particularly that part where you ask someone for three beliefs of this new version of yourself, you ask for three daily habits, and you ask for three non-negotiables. That continues to be a really high point when I present that to someone as homework, and mostly because I started to do it on myself and I realized this is really driving me in a really good direction. Has anyone had a chance to do that?
No, sorry.
Yeah, okay. That's fine. All right. Okay. Guys, again, this
No,
is, yeah, go ahead, Graham.
yeah, what I was say was just like, circling back, as all the press reporters like to say, that's a bit about the shadow work stuff that we're looking at. And one of the interesting things that I took from this YouTube show that was on, it was about 45 minutes long, a channel called Syphoria. And they were saying that as you start into shadow work, you'll meet pretty much generally one of four archetypes. And they're saying it is the Anima, the Animus, which technically it's the same thing, but because one's female, male orientated. Then you have the self, and then you also have the trickster. And what they said was, if you're a male, then I think you have the anima, which is female in nature, which I think is where they get the idea of a man having their feminine side,
Right.
sort of thing. And the anima acts as a sort of go between, like a representative of the shadow. And one of the places where it does tend to manifest itself quite a lot is in the dream states. And one of the things is, if you keep having a constant recurring dream of a exotic, alluring woman, getting a bit smoochy and romantic sort of thing, and a bit flirty, and it's a constant thing, then they say that is the archetype of the animus, saying like, there's some message being tried to communicate with you, and saying like, for ladies they have the animus, which is
Right.
male in nature, so how women always say like, the dream of this strong masculine Hulk sort of thing, doing nice things and things like that, and saying again that is their representative of their shadow trying to pass messages on.
Right.
So
The best way to one in Jungian psychology and journal work, what you do is you in waking life you continue the communication with that part of you. If the way I do it, if it's a romantic partner, I say, that was very kind of you. You're very loving. This is a part of me. And so those are always great. Now, the shadow part, where you see this dark, ominous force compelling you to do something wicked, you have to do the very same thing. And the interesting thing about this, if 2026, certainly in America, our shadow is coming up in our faces. We are being polarized in every direction. And to deny that part and to push it away makes it worse. So recognizing that and recognizing all the aggression you have to everyone else you call the other, that's a part of you. They are a part of you as much as separate from you. And that's the cultural setting. That's the kind of shadow work we should be doing a lot now. You're nodding your head, Alex. I'm glad you agree.
Well, that was another interesting aspect about it as well, because I think a lot of the purveyors of shadow work programs and books and things like that, I think they're sometimes like focusing on, a lot of the dark and evil and nasty side sort of stuff. Whereas the impression that I was getting from it, it's not so much as like, the dark and twisted evil stuff, but more generally things that get repressed. And one of the things I said about it is when your children, if you behave, you get your praise and you feel nice, but then if you like go running around and making noise and things like that, and you get scolded and chastised, then that is the sort of thing that gets put into the shadow. And they said, well, is that running around as a child part of a self-expressive element inside of you that has been repressed for so long? And so it's not so much as the dark and twisted stuff, because people sometimes have that out and open as their persona, but quite a lot of the times it's a lot of the stuff that never had the chance really to thrive, that says, look, I want to integrate into this, because it's got something to offer. A lot of people seem to think the shadow's like this dark and evil self that has to be kept on a leash like a vicious dog, when in actual fact it's probably the missing part of yourself that's never been allowed free reign to express itself, because it's always been trapped, repressed and castigated and things like that.
Yeah, no, exactly. The shadow is there as a result of all the repression, just so we can live in a normal social environment. But Alex, you had a comment. Go ahead and unmute.
Yeah, I have done work with people's shadows. A lot of the people that I'd worked with DID, their shadow manifests in what's known as a persecutor. Now, the persecutor comes along and they have a real sense of animosity towards all the other components of the system. But the main goal of every damn persecutor I've ever encountered has been exactly the same as Singlet's people's shadows, which is, don't ignore us. We're not here to be invisible. We're in your face because we've nowhere else to go.
Yeah.
And right now, you're meeting us because you've got nowhere else to go, because that's where we've placed you. We're here for you to deal with us. So that's basically it. Don't ignore us is
Exactly
the component of every shadow.
every part of a human psyche wants to be accepted and loved, even the parts that want violence. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, in this case, a lot of them, they don't want violence. It may be a British thing, but what the shadows of people that I've worked with want is a life without restraint. So I think that the phrase that I would use is something that Nathan Fillion, the actor, once used all that way back in a movie called Serenity, which is where he turned on this nightmare video track for this guy who's played by Chiwetel Ejiofor, and he said, "I'm going to show you a world without sin," and that was absolutely chilling, because that was exactly what the life of a shadow is about. Let me show you a world without filters. This is what your world looks like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Do not restrain yourself. If you do not think of the neighbor sink.
Yeah.
Basically, that's it.
Yeah. That's perfect. Yeah, I remember that scene in that movie, and yeah, you're absolutely right. So one last thing I want to give everybody, which I was talking with a friend of mine who's a hypnotist, which is once this is a separate thing from what we've been talking about, but it's a very useful, very short, very incredibly intense emotional thing you can do to anyone once they feel like they're in a good state. This could be in a hypnosis. I do this often at the end of a hypnosis session, which is once they feel like they've got a good resolution or a feeling or a resource, I have them focus on that feeling, close their eyes. I tell them to take their hands and press them on their heart. And then I have them shout in their mind very loudly, I deserve this. I deserve this. I deserve this. I deserve this. And I do that with a lot of people. I do it with people who have a great self-esteem. And so many people, regardless of how they present themselves, somewhere lack this little bit of deserving. And once you acknowledge that, I've had tears. I've had people sit for 5 minutes doing this. just acknowledging this is what I've got, and I do deserve it. So incorporate that. Use it wherever you can. In fact, you can just remind people in conversation once they have something good, say, well, you deserve it. And sometimes it really shocks them. It's a wonderful, wonderful response. All right, my friends, this has been an insightful and wonderful conversation. I'll be back next week. I may have something in mind to talk about. Any one of you are willing and able and encouraged to contact me if you have questions or thoughts of what we could talk about. And because you're here, you're not somewhere else. So you sacrificed to be here. I appreciate that sacrifice. Please go out and make the world even just a slightly bit better. Thank you so much. Please take care.
And thank you, David. Alex, what was the name of that film you mentioned? You broke up when you was mentioning the title of it.
Serenity.
It's a science fiction. It's a science fiction show. Yeah. All right, guys.
I'll have to see if I can dig that out on YouTube. Okay, thanks so much, David. Appreciate it as always.
Always. Take care.
Great talk this week. Okay, see you all. Bye-bye.
Bye.